Hello and welcome to a special week of Gardening Australia. This week was International Day of People with a Disability. So where better to be than one of my favourite spots in Sydney, an amazing community hub growing plants and opportunities for people of all abilities to connect. I'll introduce you to the team here in a minute, but before I do that, I better let you know what the rest of our team are up to.
This is the southernmost part of mainland Australia. It's Wilson's Promontory National Park, and it's home to some amazing people. Today, I'm going to meet a group who are working to protect and restore the unique vegetation.
We catch up with guest presenter Craig Miller-Randall, who'll share some of his styling secrets to make your indoor garden look great.
And I'll show you how to take seed saving to the next level. How to create your own varieties, cross-pollinate, and even crack the code of seed dormancy.
Broadly speaking, a secret is a piece of information that's known by one or two people, but not supposed to be told to others. Well, today, I'm going to share with you a secret that's already well known to the residents of Western Sydney. This is the Western Sydney University's Hawkesbury campus, an academic environment that's also home to a very special place. And that's where the secret comes in. 15 acres of the campus has been set aside for this, the Secret Garden, a not-for-profit community garden and nursery under the care of long-time nursery manager Marianne Farrer. There's just so much going on here on the site. Can you tell me a bit about the different parts?
For sure. It's a real community hub and it's run by Northwest Disability Services. Our main focus is to provide skills, fun and learning activities for people of all abilities here.
Ready to grab another one?
From the horticultural therapy programs right through to the kitchen cafe and the candle making and the mate shed. There's just so much people can choose from. It's a really special place here and I just love seeing the smiles on everybody's faces that come here. They just gain so much.
As you wander around this garden, it's really clear that its purpose is to be accessible to all. The hard, flat paths, the raised garden beds, they've all been carefully designed to remove barriers for people with disabilities and encourage them to reach their full potential all year round. This garden is self-funded, so the retail nursery is vital to its continued success. Among the plants on sale are some 30 varieties of salvias, grown under the watchful eye of Travis Darroch. So you're renowned for your salvias. Tell me a little bit about them.
This one's Salvia oxyphora. It's a beautiful salvia in the garden. Likes a bit of shade, but it can grow up to 1.2 metres to 2 metres tall. It has a beautiful pink flower. It's got buds coming out at the moment.
I can see that. It's a different shaped flower. It's much bigger.
It is a big flower, and they're a bit fluffy too. It's very unique. This one's Salvia hot lips. It's a unique one again. It's really good for the drought-tolerant garden. It likes a bit of dryness.
How big does that grow?
It grows about 1.2 metres tall, roughly. It can sucker in the garden a little bit, but not too much. So you'll get little babies throughout the garden every now and again.
Oh, that's a nice bonus.
Yeah. And this one's Salvia Joan. This one is a really tall growing salvia. It's more upright and it has beautiful magenta-like flowers as well. Good for honey eaters and bees alike.
So how did you become involved with the Secret Garden?
Well, I was going to TAFE many years ago. I just had come out of school and I was getting bullied a lot at TAFE. So I wanted to become more a part of the community in the local area. So I decided to volunteer here at the garden.
So the garden was established to help people with mixed abilities.
That's right, Costa. I have Asperger's syndrome. I find in the community, I find it difficult to get along with people with my own age, and this place has taught me how I can be a part of the community by getting involved with plants and helping people choose plants in the nursery, and also looking after other people with disabilities. As an employee of the garden, I get to help people learn how to propagate plants or touch the soil or flourish in their own little way. Just flourish in the way I did coming to the garden. It's just one of those things that you can't explain. It's just a beautiful spot. It's just unique.
You right, Kel?
Yeah, I'm right.
Okay.
The nursery at the Secret Garden keeps busy by propagating and selling a wide range of plants.
That's okay, it's all good. We're doing well here.
Hello, Kel.
Hello, Costco.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
That's good. What are you up to today? Hi, Christine.
Hello.
Tubing up plants.
Oh, yeah? And what about the Secret Garden? What do you like about being in the garden?
See friends and work with a lot of plants and talk to people and do gardening around here.
This secret garden has come about because of community, and it feeds back into it. What do you see looking forward?
A bright future, a bright future. Being able to help other people like myself and being able to help customers come in and meet them and greet them and have the same interests, that makes a world of difference to me, but them as well. Yeah.
How do I stop the blackbirds from digging up my seedlings or having a crack at my leafy greens? Well, some people have a lot of success with toy snakes, but you need to move these round a fair bit, and I've found blackbirds are way too smart to fall for it for too long. So this is my solution. I stretch garden twine between the stakes about 10 to 15 centimetres above the seedling. The idea is that the blackbirds don't like anything above their heads when they're foraging on the ground, so they'll leave your seedlings alone. It works for me.
When do I cut the leaves off my bulbs? Well, ideally, never. The reason why is as the bulb dies down, the goodness in the leaves will go back into the bulb, so you get better growth and better flowers next year. If you cut it off while the foliage is still green, you're reducing the size of the bulb. So ideally, let them die down naturally, but once the foliage gets brown, dry and brittle, you can actually pull it off to tidy the area up.
Can I plant proteas with natives? Well, of course you can. Proteas, although more commonly found in South Africa, are in the same family as Banksias, Grevilleas and Hakeas. They even look a little bit like our Waratahs. Now, they will grow well with other natives from other families, as long as you're in a sunny, well-drained position. Be mindful though, they don't like too much phosphorus, so a low phosphorus fertiliser and they should do really well.
If you're new to gardening, you may find the fertiliser aisle at your local nursery a little bamboozling. There's so many choices, and what do you really need? Well, never fear, because Jane is here to help you unlock the secrets to a satisfied, well-fed garden.
We all need food to stay healthy and happy, and plants are no different. But while we can pop around to the local store and get what we want, plants aren't that lucky. They are quite literally rooted to the spot, and they depend on us gardeners to give them most of the nutrients that they need to grow and prosper. So what happens when you're standing in the fertiliser aisle at your local nursery and there's so many choices? It's quite confusing. So where do you start? Well, it's time for a fertiliser masterclass. First up, it's vital to know the difference between soil conditioners and fertilisers. Let's deal with soil conditioners first. Soil conditioners are really necessary in your garden to improve the soil, to improve water holding capacity, compaction, and also to alter pH if necessary. Soil conditioners are things like bag compost or homegrown compost. I use that a lot in my garden. And things like bag manures, cow manure of course is really good, and worm poo, that's a beauty. And even the liquid seaweeds, they're really good in the garden because of what they do to the soil. The difference between a soil conditioner and a fertiliser is that the fertiliser has essential nutrients good for plant growth. And you can tell because they always contain N for nitrogen, phosphorus with a P, and K for potassium. Fertilisers can also be liquid or pelletised and organic or inorganic. So what's the difference? What's in them and what's best for different situations? Let's start off with inorganic and organic fertilisers. Inorganic fertilisers are synthetic, they're man-made, and some people might freak out when they hear synthetic fertilisers. Well, I don't think there's anything to worry about. They are concentrated forms of often naturally occurring minerals, and if you use them correctly, they're good in the garden. The main advantage of inorganic fertilisers is that they deliver precise concentrations of nutrients to the plant and are often tailored to the requirements and needs of a specific group of plants, for example, citrus or roses. On the other hand, organic or natural fertilisers are manufactured from one or a combination of organic ingredients. And organic just simply means that they were once living. Things like dead fish. You've got pelletised chook manure and, of course, blood and bone, which is an obvious source, or you can have a mixture of the ingredients. Organic fertilisers usually have a lower quantity of nutrients than do inorganic fertilisers, but they're slow releasing, and as my grandfather said, you can't do any harm with blood and bone. It takes about 6 weeks to start to work, and it's slow release. You can't burn the plants. And you'll notice that most of the organic ones have a bit of a smell. When it comes to fertilisers, you can also choose between liquids and solids. Let's look at liquid fertilisers first. Plant roots take up nutrients when they're in liquid form, so it stands to reason that these liquid fertilisers will work really well as a quick fix. The thing about it is that you do it in the growing season, when the plant is growing and fruiting and flowering. Spring and summer is ideal. Organic liquid fertilisers work a treat on fast-growing green vegetables. You can also use it if you're planting something in the garden or doing like indoor plants, bring them outside and give them a good water like that. It works very quickly and it's good for microbial action in the soil as well. Inorganic liquid fertilisers generally come in powdered form, so you need to make sure that they are put into some water and dissolved really well. They're soluble in water, so just stir it round and that'll be fine. Don't be tempted to double the dose. It can do more harm than good. It very often can burn the plant. It's easier to follow the instructions. Which brings us to solid fertilisers. And again, you've got the organic and the inorganic fertilisers. And the common factor is that they are slow release. You don't have to use the fertilisers every 2 or 3 weeks. In this case, you can use them once or twice every year. You've got pelletised chook manure, that's the organic variety. And then these ones are the inorganic. They're called prills. You often find them in a bag of potting mix. They're called control release fertiliser because they work as the temperature rises and as it gets wetter, hence the control. When it comes to choosing a fertiliser, there is such a huge range that it really comes down to a personal choice. And I just think by doing a bit of research, certainly reading the instructions on the label, and experiment in your own home garden, and you'll find one that's perfect for you.
Now, who hasn't thumbed through magazines or scrolled through Insta and ogled at the beautifully potted up indoor plant collections? Every time we visit guest presenter Craig Miller-Randall's place, it feels like we're walking into a magazine. Well, guess what? He's keen to share some of his best tips that'll get your indoor plants looking just as good.
After spending a few weeks covering the practicalities of how to keep your indoor plants alive and thriving, today we get to talk about the thing about indoor gardening that brings me the most joy. And that is styling your plants to bring beauty and life into your home. I'm a furniture and homewares designer, and when I'm creating a new piece, I'm always thinking about how shape, texture and colour will make a space look and feel a certain way. Those same principles apply to plants. So if you want to take your styling game to the next level, I've got some amazing tips for you. Anyone who comes to my house will find that it rarely looks the same 2 visits in a row. I'm always moving plants around, playing with different groupings and swapping plants into different pots. My plants are all growing in lightweight plastic pots. That way, I can give them great drainage, customise their potting media and change their look anytime I like. If you plant directly into the decorative pot, it'll be heavier to move around and you're stuck with that look. Who wants that kind of commitment? Simply changing a plant into a new decorative pot can make you see a plant in a whole new light. Well, it definitely brings me a lot of joy anyway. I rarely place one solo plant on its own like a sad little island. I much prefer to group plants in odd numbers of 3s or 5s or 7s. It might sound a little bit arbitrary, but using odd numbers creates a really balanced effect that's much more pleasing on the eye. Another composition tip is the pyramid principle. Imagine a rough triangle or a pyramid shape and then place pieces within it. Tall plants at the back, smaller to the sides and the front. Here, I've got 3 different Alocasia species of different sizes. When grouped together in this way, they fill in the space in a way that adds height and depth, but doesn't feel cluttered. Like there are innumerable ways to organise a book collection by size or author or colour, there's just as many ways to organise a plant collection. Sometimes I like to group plants by colour, like this amazing Oxalis triangularis, Begonia Connie Boswell, or Coleus Black Prince. Now, all of these plants share very different leaf patterns, sizes and shapes, but they also share the same beautiful tone of purple, which means that they're all telling us the same story. People often use art to bring colour into a space, but I fill my walls with plants because to me, nature is the highest form of art. This stairwell is one of my favourite features. Without plants, it'd just be a big white void, but I've chosen plants that cascade down the vertical space. We often call this vertical drama, and it's the kind of impact you get by getting plants up off the ground and using all this space above. The construction of this feature is really low tech. All I've done is drilled white shelf brackets to the walls. Now, if you're renting, just get the highest rated adhesive hooks you can find. Some of them will hold up to 7 kilos. Because the plants themselves are the feature here, I didn't want anything else to distract from them, so I've used plain white plastic pots and clear fishing line, which disappears against the wall. There's definitely a time and a place to be a bit bolder with your pot choices, but I like to use what I call the one or the other rule. Is the plant the star or the pot? And stick with either one. So here you can see I've got this beautiful pattern pot, and this philodendron golden dragon's got a very simple green leaf, and they look quite beautiful together. But when you have a plant like this superstar, which is Oxalis triangularis, the leaf is the star and the pot is just a simple white one. I think they look beautiful together. Nice designer planters can be quite pricey, and if you want to grow a dense indoor jungle, the costs can really add up. But there are a few things you can do to get a designer look on a budget. You can transform an otherwise ragtag collection of pots, maybe something you already have around the house, a bargain from a hardware store, or even an op shop find, and give them a totally new look with chalk paint. Just 2 coats is usually enough to give you a smooth, matte finish. You can do multiple pots in the same colour. I usually use greys or black and white and turn a mishmash of random pots into a beautiful, cohesive set. Often what's lacking in budget planter options are interesting shapes and sizes. To create the kind of display we looked at before, like the pyramid, it really helps to have something tall like this at the back. Now, I've seen these go for over $100, but I'm going to show you a fantastic way to make them at home on a budget. If I take the pots I painted earlier and put them like this, the small one acts like a plinth. I do this all the time. Then you glue them together with heavy-duty adhesive and you've turned 2 cheap pots into something modern and really beautiful. By keeping a few styling principles in mind, you can present your indoor garden like a collection of natural living art. But remember, plants are always going to be an amazing addition to your environment. They bring life to a space. So the trick is, don't stress too much about the rules, just enjoy your plants and how they make you feel.
Sweet basil is an Australian kitchen garden favourite. I use it in salads, as garnishes and to make pesto. It's fast growing and big on reward. But there's a lot more to basils than just sweet basils, and elsewhere around the world, other varieties are beloved. So let's broaden our basil horizons. The big gun in the basil world is lettuce leaf basil, and its leaves can get as big as your hand. They're a paler green colour and slightly more aniseed in flavour rather than sweet. And even though it's an annual, it can persist a bit longer than sweet basil when the weather starts to cool down. If you haven't got much space or you want to grow basil in a pot, try spicy glow basil. It's got lovely, small, pungent leaves and a really compact growth habit. As well as coming in a range of forms, basil cultivars also come in a range of flavours. This one is the cinnamon basil, which has quite a strong scent, and this one is lemon basil, which is used a lot in Thai cuisine. Not all basils are used for purely culinary purposes. This one is sacred basil, also known as tulsi. It's a perennial and it's a traditional Ayurvedic medicine herb. So next time you're in your nursery or garden centre and you're choosing your warm season seedlings, go a little bit bold with your basils.
Saving seeds can be a magical act. From one plant, you can save and sow generations of seed. And if you want to learn how to do it more effectively, well, you don't want to miss Jerry's masterclass.
Believe it or not, on my average-sized Brisbane block, I've never got less than 100 different things to eat. And I owe this success largely to saving seed. So what I'd like to do today is to show you some advanced seed-saving techniques and ramp it up a level. Firstly, selecting your own varieties. The benefits of doing this is that you can shape crops to suit your own preferences and to suit local soils and conditions over time. The fundamental rule is to save seed from your best plants. Whatever the qualities are that you prefer, save seed from these plants and eat the rest. Now, what you're essentially doing is speeding up what might occur in the wild, only in your garden. You can do this in a much shorter period of time. Take this plant, for example. This is Mitsuba, or Japanese parsley, and it's a very fine little herb. My first challenge was to find a place in my garden where it would grow at all. It didn't like winter and it didn't like summer. But eventually I found this location. And then I started selecting seed from my best plants. And these were the strongest growing with the largest leaves, and they could grow all year round. Now, over 5 years, I've selected this batch here. And so what I've done is I've created a localized variety. This is suited to the subtropics and it's very happy in my soil and my conditions. Variety selection is how gardeners have bred many vegetable cultivars that we know and love, like white zucchinis and purple tomatoes, by selecting preferentially for chance occurrences over generations. The next level up is cross-pollination. And that's much more controlled than the random examples of genetic mutations I've just showed you. In a garden like this, the pollinators don't really care where the pollen has come from or where it's going to. But when you hybridise a plant, you are in control. You become the bee. And that way, the results, the seed, are much more predictable. A while back, I created this hybrid. I crossed a red capsicum with a yellow chilli, and the result is this plant. And it has the heat of a chilli and the juiciness of a capsicum. Now, if you're trying to create your own hybrids at home, remember to keep them within the same genus or the same species. I was confident that this would work because both the capsicum and the chilli are Capsicum annuum, the same species. I want to improve the size and juiciness of my own spicy capsicum chilli hybrid. To do this, I'm cross-pollinating it with a cayenne chilli. They are the same species, so I know they're compatible. I start in the morning when the flowers are most receptive to being pollinated, using a tuning fork to vibrate the flower. This imitates a buzzing bee and causes the flower to drop its pollen. If you don't have a tuning fork, you could also use a cotton bud. The first step is to remove its own stamens so it doesn't self-pollinate. They are the male reproductive parts. The next step is pollination using pollen from my yellow variety. The final step is excluding the pollinated flower from other pollen brought in by other pollinators. This ensures the only seed produced are the ones you're wanting. I use pantyhose because it excludes insects but keeps the flower dry in wet weather. Then you have to wait for seed to develop, sow them and assess the offspring for success. Dormancy and inhibitors. Getting seed from some plants, like this Jubea chilensis, the Chilean wine palm, is really easy. They're threatened with extinction in the wild because of over-collection, but they're self-fertile. So a single plant like this, in my garden, produces loads and loads of viable seed. But the catch is that the seed is dormant and won't germinate easily. It's like they're asleep, waiting for just the right conditions before they'll wake up and start growing. For different plants, this can mean waiting for rain, a particular season, or even a bushfire. With this palm, it's got such a hard shell, the seed can remain dormant for up to 7 years. But I've got a little trick which reduces that period of dormancy. You see, if the seed is fully mature, you can sometimes hear the endosperm, which is like the embryo of the seed inside, moving around. It rattles. And so with seed like that, I can use a macadamia nut cracker to split open the shell, and then I get the embryo, put that in some potting mix, and within 6 months, it's germinated. Seed saving isn't that difficult, and even the more advanced techniques that I've shown you just require a little bit of practice once you know how. And best of all, it opens the door to an entirely new world of plants and possibilities.
Still to come on Gardening Australia. Tino has a top tip for perfect stone fruit. Josh visits an impressive Perth Verge garden, attracting admirers and wildlife. And this week's My Garden Path shares the dazzling world of a jewellery designer who's inspired by her own garden.
southernmost tip of mainland Australia lies one of our most beloved national parks, Wilson's Promontory. Looking out there, you could almost imagine you could swim to Tasmania. And up until about 12,000 years ago, you could have walked there. This is where mainland Australia met Tassie. It's called Yuruk, or Warmoon, or just the Prom. It doesn't matter what you call it, it is one of Australia's premier destinations for nature lovers. There's this incredible landscape of granite mountains tumbling down to the most rugged coastline. Beautiful beaches, of course, but we're here because there is also the most diverse vegetation. But over the last 70 years, the vegetation in one particular area has been changing for the worse. And Ranger Jim Whelan has been working on a solution. Jim, you've been working here long enough to earn the nickname Mr. Prom. Tell me about your career here.
Well, I actually first started coming to the Prom in the 1950s. And then when I turned 18, I managed to get myself a job here, working on the walking tracks, building and maintaining them. I did that for a few years, and then I got the job as what's called an agistment ranger. There used to be cattle on the Prom, adjusted by local dairy farmers, and it was my job to ride around the horse and have my dog and look after those cattle. So that's how I got to know the Yannaki Isthmus quite well.
And it is a unique place for plants, isn't it?
A very famous botanist from Melbourne Uni, he used to say that the Prom was like a microcosm of much of Victoria's ecosystems.
Your focus as a ranger has been on caring for a lot of those vegetations, but one in particular.
The isthmus used to be what's called an open grassy woodland. So you have lots of grasses with orchids and lilies and the native grasses, and there was an overstory just dotted through of banksias and casuarinas. Beautiful area, used to be famous for its wildflowers. But since the mid-1800s, cattle were introduced, and deer were introduced, and then early 1900s, rabbits were introduced. So you got a lot of grazing on top of that grassland, and you get bare ground, and it's only the unpalatable species that come up, which is tea tree. Now, tea tree can be controlled by fire, but fires were stopped. So now the whole area is nearly a monoculture of tea tree.
But, I mean, the tea tree is a native species here.
It is a native species, but it belonged just behind the fore dunes and dotted through along there, not to take over the whole area. The coastal grassy woodland across its former range has disappeared by 85%, and the Prom holds 3/4 of what's left. Once it's gone off the Prom, that's the end of it. And so if we're going to recover this site, we need to push the tea tree back.
You need hundreds, if not thousands, of seeds to fall from the canopy, to hit the ground, to not be eaten, to then finally get one or two to germinate.
Botanist and ecologist Dr. John Morgan has also been working at the Prom.
Well, this banksia here germinated last year, and we know that because it's got its first two seed leaves, what are called cotyledons, right at the very base of the plant. They're all shriveled up, so that's probably 12 months old.
Wow.
Banksias seem to be struggling at two fronts. One is the persistence of large old trees, like the trees behind us, but also the lack of seedlings to replace old trees as they die. So there's a dual question going on here. Why are trees dying, the big ones, and why don't we see little seedlings replacing them over time?
Given all the vegetation changes that's going on, I was specifically looking at the drought tolerance of coast banksia. So we think of coast banksia as being quite drought-tolerant species, right? When they're seedlings about this high, they grow roots that shoot down about 1 metre or 2 metres deep. They really like accessing deeper water resources. When there's dense tea tree around, water can't penetrate deep into the soil profile, and so banksia can actually access those water resources.
We come with hypotheses, questions about how landscapes work and how to manage those landscapes to advantage native species. So students would come along and provide the information to actually demonstrate whether that idea was right or not. And then handing that over to the management agency to actually implement their research is the most satisfying thing. It closes the loop from the question through to the action.
Restoration of ecosystems is a bit like gardening on steroids for two reasons. One is there's so much of it, we're talking thousands of hectares here. And the other one is we don't know the answers to a lot of our questions. And to find those out, we've got to do lots of little experiments. And on this particular site, what we want to know here is, will the banksia survive if they get a fire across them? because we know that fire is one of the key tools we've got to remove the tea tree, but we don't want it to destroy all the other plants we want to keep.
So you're going to set fire to these?
Yeah. Much probably to the disappointment of the nursery growers. Yes, we're going to put fuel around these, certain amounts of fuel in different ones, just to see how much fire they can handle and still recover and bounce back.
Propagating for replanting is a task supervised by long-term Friends of the Prom member, Mary Walker. From what I hear, you're the propagation specialist.
Well, I wouldn't classify myself as a specialist, but I try hard and I've read a lot of books, and we try different things down here. Some things work, some things don't, so it's just trial and error, really.
And so what are you actually propagating?
We propagate the Banksias for Jim's study that he's doing up in Isthmus.
So some get put back into the land?
The land.
I believe some of them also get set on fire.
Yeah, well, the last lot we planted out, I think, was a quadrat of 100 plants, and I think they're going to be set on fire very shortly.
How does that feel?
Oh, I was gutted.
But Jim and his team are already seeing results from previous planned burns.
Yeah, it's one of the first areas we started working on, and we've already seen some of the really important grasses coming back. So you can see, for instance, here, this acrotriche is a very prickly plant, and it's actually protected the grasses from grazing.
Ah, so anyone coming and eating them as they come up?
That's exactly right. And the kangaroo grass here, that's really important. It's a good coloniser, and it spreads right across the ground and fills up a lot of these blank areas here, these open areas. And what else will start coming in now is the orchids and the lilies and plants like that. And the thing about kangaroo grass is that it's what's called a seafall grass, so it's dry in the winter and you can burn it, whereas it's green in the summer and it's not flammable, whereas a lot of the introduced grasses are the other way around. So they're quite dangerous and burn in the summer when you don't want them to burn, and you can't burn them in the winter.
So the timing on that burning is really important.
Yeah, and that would have been learnt over the last 60,000 years by our First Nations people, and we've set that knowledge aside and we need to bring it back.
Jim, there still is a bit of tea tree in the landscape.
Yeah, there is, but once we can start getting these fires through in the winter, the cool burns through, that'll completely take out the tea tree, because the tea tree just lays down and cries when it sees smoke.
Oh, really? It doesn't hack the fire at all?
Not at all.
And so one more burn and you reckon you'll be free of it?
I do, on this site.
Wow.
Once we know we've got the science right, and we've already demonstrated in one area, and we need to repeat that in a second area to just show it wasn't a fluke, just by accident. And then if we can demonstrate that, then we can work on a much larger scale. I think one of the biggest learnings we're getting out of this is the power of having researchers, land managers and community working together. That's a really powerful trifecta of that. And the principles we've learnt there can be applied to the rest of the park.
There's something really exciting about a fruit tree laden with fruit. But if you're like me and you like quality over quantity, I've got a great tip for you. Thin your fruit. If you come in here on this apricot, you'll see that the fruit form in clusters. Now, there's a few problems with this. There's no airflow around the fruit, so therefore pests like brown rot and other insects can get in there and actually ruin your fruit. So by thinning them out, just picking that one off there, and then that one there, you're allowing airspace around the existing fruit, and you've got enough space for them to get bigger. So by thinning your fruit, you'll not only get more delicious fruit, they'll be bigger as well.
It's no secret that I'm a big fan of the Verge Garden. I mean, in suburbs and streets all around the country, there's so much potential real estate for us to grow on. And Josh is right there with me.
Verges can be a bit of a forgotten zone when it comes to gardening. It's that council-owned strip of land out the front of houses that people are often unsure what they can do with it. Well, you can do a lot, because with the right permission and support, you can really extend and enhance your garden space. Here in Perth, local councils are engaging in an innovative program by Water Corporation to create water-wise verges featuring Australian native plants. One of the people behind it is Claire Luger.
In the summertime, we use 40% of all the water in our house outside on our gardens. So we know from the research that we do that the biggest savings people can make are outside. Some of the additional benefits are that a water-wise verge can have a great cooling effect on your house.
Someone who took on this initiative and ran with it is Perth gardener Lana Hinton. How big's the area?
As you can see, it's really big. It's about 240 square metres. So I had years and years, about 7 years of actually mowing the kikuyu grass.
During the hottest times of the year, Lana's lawn had to be watered 3 times a week. But since it's been replaced by native plants, only once a week, which has massively reduced her water usage. And how did you go about designing the plant layout?
Well, the town of Vincent actually like you to put forward a proposal of your plan. So I literally made up a rough sketch, and what I wanted to sort of create was 3 different canopies, so with the council peppermint trees, and then have a sort of second story of some eucalyptus trees to bring some birds, and then have a lower ground level of some established plants that would flower at different times of the year, and of course some beautiful banksia and kangaroo paw for colour. I'm looking for some advice about what to do with the coastal mort. I planted this thinking it was a medium-sized tree, but as you can see, it's growing pretty fast over the 3 years under the power line.
So, look, the first thing to note is that because you planted it, you can prune it, whereas with the peppermints, they're council trees, so only they can prune those, and that's important on verges. The other thing is the term medium-sized tree is pretty loose. That can be highly variable. So, for example, these trees, these can range from 4 metres up to 10 metres.
Okay.
And that's going to potentially cause a problem there, and that variation in growth will depend on the growing conditions, so you'll have to wait and see. The other thing is these don't like to be pruned on top. You know, part of their charm is this rounded habit. So really at some point, you might have to bite the bullet and cut it off down at the base.
Oh, really? That dramatic?
Yeah, but look, don't panic. You know, these are a mallee.
Okay.
So, you know, they will respond. You'll get new shoots coming off from that lignotubor at the base. They call it coppicing, or in gardening, we call this technique stooling. And what you're actually doing is promoting all of this new foliage growth. You'll get nice new stems. They'll still flower and look lovely, and they can be managed a bit more at a suitable height. But really, it's so important when picking verge trees to really get one that you know is going to be the right height for the right spot. Great job with the contrast and textures and colours.
When is the time of year to cut the kangaroo paw, and how hard do I cut them back?
Okay, so once they've finished flowering like this, you can see it's drying out, looking a little bit tired. These stems can be cut right back at the base. No point doing it halfway because you'll have a dead stick there. Also, the daggy leaves and so forth, they can be cleaned up, but I wouldn't do a big cut back on this until it cools down a little bit. Eventually, you want to cut it pretty much down to the base, and that opens it up and allows the new buds to produce new foliage, which of course will be what will support next year's flowers. You'll get a number of years out of this. The trick is to cut it back each year, and by doing that, it kind of rejuvenates it, and you'll get several years, no problems at all. What you can also do, as the clump grows over time, you can actually break parts off and get a piece that's got some new vegetative buds and some root material, and that can in fact be planted out elsewhere in your garden to produce a new plant. It's kind of like cloning the original. So if you do that, it will last forever. Just keep growing it on and growing it on. Lana's verge looks amazing, but if you're inspired to try it yourself, there are some important things to consider.
Definitely to contact your local council, get some advice about the rules and regulations of what you're able to do.
And what are some of those key practical considerations?
Well, in the planning stage, when I mapped out and sort of had a bit of a design, the town of Vincent gave me some advice about low-level planting close to the edge of the road, as you can see. Also, low level at the front and the back of the verge, so cars are able to reverse out and be able to see traffic coming and going.
We've had phenomenal interest in the first 3 years of the program. We've converted over 400 verges so far and planted more than 19,000 native species of plants. So we're off to a great start.
I think it brings a lot of peace and relaxation and a bit of tranquility when I sit out on the front veranda and I can hear the birds, or watching the amount of bees that have actually come to the verge during the flowering of different plants.
As well as gardening on site here at the Secret Garden, the participants also take part in other creative projects in what's called the Mates Shed. Today, they're building these fantastic bee hotels, and they are actually sold over in the nursery to raise funds to help support the garden. So from these creative gardeners to another who draws inspiration from her garden.
About 12 weeks ago, a friend and I decided to have a leek off, and we've both planted leeks at the same time. And sometime soon, on a leek day, not a leek end, we're going to cook them up and see who's grown the best leeks. We're really proud of our leek day and leek end jokes. Plants and gardening play a huge role in my life. It's one of my favourite hobbies to get out in the sun and get my hands dirty on the weekend. And it influences my work during the week. The way that I make and what I create is hugely influenced by what I grow. I'm Ada Hodgson and I'm a jeweller. I work in the Nicholas building on Swanston Street in Melbourne, and it's a very beautiful historic building, and it brings with it a lot of history of artists' studios over 100 years or so. I take lots of walks around Melbourne, especially to the beautiful parks. Places like the Fitzroy Gardens with the conservatory and the fern tree gully and the fairy tree allow me some space to think and talk and meditate and come up with designs. One of my designs is a garden path ring, which is meant to symbolise stepping stones around one's own life. I had so many diverse experiences growing up because my parents are real risk takers and have tried so many diverse things, and that's really rubbed off on me. My first jewellery range was made from beads and fishing wire when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I would stick them all up along my mum's naturopathy clinic and sell them to her patients. I did quite well in high school, which allowed me to get into law commerce, and I hated it. I fell asleep during lectures. It was a total disaster. This led to me realising where my true passion lies, which is working with my hands and making and designing. So I applied for RMIT to the gold and silversmithing course. I just knew that this was the right path for me. Adornment is one of the most ancient ways of expressing oneself, and creating and crafting jewellery is an ancient craft, and it's very powerful to be a part of something that has been around for so long. I'd like to show you some things I've been working on. Here's an artichoke pendant inspired from my own garden. Next to it is a little pendant with flowers that have been impressed into it. And then some hoops that have jasmine and wax flowers entwined on a vine. To make an anthurium earring, first I cut a shape out from wax. I'm going to start carving some of the details of the shield of the anthurium. Next, I start to form the spadix, which is actually covered in all of the tiny flowers. From here, I send it to a foundry who cast it into silver or gold. And I end up with an earring that looks just like an anthurium. I was inspired by aerial photography. I found these incredible photos of Yellowstone National Park. So I took a trip there and saw it for myself, and it's just as incredible in real life. I was working with enamel at the time, which is powdered glass that I was painting into metal and creating jewellery from. First, I put down a base layer. Then I fire it in the kiln. Then I add different colours and fire it in the kiln again. The enamel piece sits in the kiln for about 2 minutes at 800 degrees, which allows all of the glass to fuse. As it comes out, it starts to develop its colour and its patterns. I think that looks like my shot of Yellowstone. I'm really happy with that. Why do I like the garden so much? I guess I find peace in the natural world, and I really love coming home to my own secret garden. In a similar way that my garden's developing and changing with what I learn about it, so is my work. It's not linear. It sort of plays in roundabouts, and they both feed into each other.
Here at the Secret Garden, there's all creatures great and small, bringing colour to this wonderful landscape. Who have we got here, Claire?
Here we've got our two very adorable little donkeys. The smaller one is Simpson, the larger one is Zach.
Who else lives here?
We've got quite a few creatures here. We've got some sheep, a goat, quite a few chickens, only 1 or 2 roosters, you don't want too many of them, some ducks, and of course our very adorable little guinea pigs.
And just like these guys, I bet your garden is hungry for some attention this weekend. Here's what you need to do. Cool Temperate gardeners make some baby begonias from leaf cuttings. Select healthy foliage, cut into small wedges and sit in propagation mix. They'll grow roots in no time. Summer may have just begun, but gardeners are always thinking ahead. Sowing borlotti beans now means you'll have a bounty of butte beans for autumn stews and winter soups. Although they look like cotton wool clinging to branches, woolly aphids suck sap and wreak havoc on apples and pears. To see them off, paint clusters with metho or rubbing alcohol. In warm temperate gardens, blueberry harvest is almost over. Once fruiting is finished, prune out older canes to encourage fresh growth and even bigger, better berries next year. Fill gaps in gardens with full-on foliage. In shady spots, try hot as heucheras and colourful cordylines, while canna lilies and phormiums add drama and make a statement in the sun. These holidays introduce kids to the joy of growing succulents. Easy to propagate from pups or cuttings, these tough cookies come in a range of cool colours, shapes and forms that kids love. Got some vertical space in your subtropical garden? Drop in a dragon fruit. This hardy, handsome climbing cactus produces fab fruits which follow fragrant night-blooming flowers. Summer prunes stone fruit now. Peaches, nectarines and apricots produce fruit on new wood, so cut existing branches back by a third. Follow with a feed and they'll rocket along until winter. If mozzies are eating you alive in the garden each evening, tell them to buzz off by blotting out breeding sites, removing standing water from sources, planters, tarps, pots and buckets. In the tropics, collect fallen fruit. If it's infested with fruit fly, it can't be composted. Instead, place fruits in a sealed black plastic bag, leave in the sun for a week and then bung in the bin. It's mango madness at the moment, so if you've got more than you can manage, cut them into chunks and freeze for up to 10 months, or slice thinly and air dry for a delicious snack. In full bloom are the fluffy flowers of the lemon myrtle, Bacchausia citriodora. This beautiful native tree is brilliant bush tucker, the aromatic foliage used to flavour teas, sweets and savouries. Arid gardeners head outside and harvest. Leafy greens, capsicums and toms should be harvested early, as soon as they mature, as regular picking promotes continuous cropping. Give your zucchini and pumpkins a hand with pollination, gently moving pollen from male to female flowers. If growing rockmelon or watermelon, transfer pollen from any flower to another. Shift worm farms into the shade and keep them moist with wet towels or ice cubes. To stop ants and slaters moving in and taking over, place the legs of the worm farm into tins of water. Get into it, gardeners, and enjoy the outdoors this weekend. And if you need even more inspiration, head over to our YouTube channel for tips, tricks, and great tales. What a fantastic day it's been, connecting with so many people in this amazing community. There's no doubt that we all have our own unique abilities, and here at the Secret Garden, everyone can come and contribute. Have a fun week ahead. Can't wait to see you next time.
Have you ever wondered how you could preserve your garden harvests for even longer? Well, today I'm meeting Sandor Katz, who's been leading the fermentation revolution around the world. He says it's simple, it's delicious, and it's really good for you. And today, he's going to show us how to do it.
Craig Miller-Randall is back with some top tips to propagate your indoor plants.
And I'll introduce you to the mother and daughter team that really makes my garden come to life.